নমস্কাৰ অসম ইলেকশ্যন ৱাটছলৈ স্বাগতম বিধানসভা নিৰ্বাচনৰ কাষ চাপি অহাৰ লগে লগে আমি প্ৰায়ে প্ৰাৰ্থী দল প্ৰতিশ্ৰুতি এইবিলাকৰ ওপৰত গুৰুত্ব দিওঁ কিন্তু আজি আমি দৃশ্যমান নোহোৱা বা কমকে দেখা পোৱা এটা বিষয়ৰ ওপৰত আলোচনা কৰিব খুজিছোঁ সেইটো হৈছে টকা পইচা নিৰ্বাচনত প্ৰকৃততে কিমান খৰচ হৈছে কোনে খৰচ কৰিছে আৰু শেষত ই আমাৰ গণতন্ত্ৰক কাৰ লগত জবাবদাহি কৰে এই বিষয়ে আলোচনা কৰিবলৈ মোৰ লগত এডিআৰৰ এগৰাকী মুখপাত্ৰ শ্ৰীমতী শেলী মহাজন উপস্থিত আছে তেখেত এডিআৰৰ লগত দুটা দশকতকৈ অধিক সময় দিন কাম কৰি আছে very warm welcome Shelly ji please come in
Thank you so much for having me, Ariful, today for this episode.
Okay, Shelly ji, প্ৰথম যিটো মোৰ মৌলিক প্ৰশ্ন আপোনালৈ আছে কিন্তু জটিল কথাৰে আৰম্ভ কৰিম এইটো জটিল কথা যদিও একেবাৰে সহজ অসমত আইনী সীমা আছে বিধানসভা নিৰ্বাচনত প্ৰতিজন প্ৰাৰ্থীৰ বাবে প্ৰায় 40 লাখ টকা এজন প্ৰাৰ্থীয়ে 40 লাখ টকা খৰচ কৰিব পাৰে তেওঁৰ নিৰ্বাচনী প্ৰচাৰ ইত্যাদি কিন্তু ৰাজনৈতিক দলসমূহে কিমান খৰচ কৰিব পাৰে তাৰ কোনো সীমা নাই গতিকে প্ৰাৰ্থী নিয়ন্ত্ৰিত হৈ থকাৰ সময়তে দলসমূহ নিয়ন্ত্ৰিত নহয় ইয়াৰ ফলত এনে পৰিস্থিতিৰ সৃষ্টি নহয়নে যে আইনী সীমা কাৰ্যত কম অৰ্থপূৰ্ণ হৈ পৰে কোনো মিনিং নাই let me speak in English so that it's more comprehensible for you let me begin with a basic but critical point there is a legal limit about 40 lakh per candidate in Assam Assembly Election but there is no limit on how much political parties can spend so while candidates are regulated parties are not doesn't this create a situation where the legal cap become ineffective less meaningful
Right. So that's a very important question, actually. I think firstly, it's very important to understand why do we have a legal limit on candidates spending in the first place, right? It's basically driven by a twofold objective. Firstly, it's important that all candidates can contest elections on an equal footing, right? Just on the account of having more resources, it should not be that a candidate is favored over the another. And the second objective behind this is to prevent the influence of money power, right? Or the influence of big money on elections. However, as you rightly pointed out, if there's a cap on candidates' election expenditure and there's none on political parties, right, it actually creates a structural imbalance. So right now, candidates have a legal limit of 40 lakhs. Parties don't face any such ceiling. And it is very common knowledge that a significant proportion of campaign expenditure, which is routed through political parties rather than candidates. So this actually dilutes the intent of election expenditure limits, and it also makes a regulatory framework partially ineffective. The gap does exist in law, but if you look in practice, it often exceeds this limit through indirect channels. So let me also talk about a little bit of data here, because it's important before we begin with other issues and we touch upon other issues related to campaign finance, we understand how was it during the last elections. So ADR actually analyzed the election expenditure statements of the assembly elections that happened in 2021. Because 5 state elections happened together. So when parties, they file their election expenditure, they do a consolidated declaration. But when we look at the data of expenses from Assam state units of political parties, what we see that in the last elections, parties spent close to 23.648 crore on assembly elections. If you look at the analysis of the candidates' election expenditure statement, in the last election, the cap was about 30.80 lakhs, and we analyzed about 106 candidates, out of which 19% of these candidates, the MLAs who declared their official election expenses, they declared election expenses less than 50% of the expense limit in their constituency. And then when we look at the similar analysis, the average money which was spent by these 106 MLAs that we analyzed, it was close to 20 lakh rupees, exactly 20.10 lakhs, which is only 65% of expense limit. So let us understand that there's been a discourse that politicians time and again mention that expenditure limits, they're not realistic. They do not account for inflation and there needs to adjust them. But if you look at official declaration, the candidates are not even able to exhaust the complete limit that they have. They're only able to exhaust like 65% of it on average. So it is very clear that there's visible spending which is happening on elections. Parties are declaring crores of election expenses, and while at the same time, the official expenses show a very different picture. So I think this is how it is at this moment.
Yes, গতিকে ফলপ্ৰসূভাৱে যদি আমি চাওঁ তেতিয়াহ'লে ইয়াৰ বিভিন্ন অংশ দলীয় চেনেলৰ পৰা আনুষ্ঠানিক প্ৰতিবেদন ব্যৱস্থাৰ বাহিৰত ঘটিব পাৰে। অৰ্থাৎ সেইবিলাক কোনেও ধৰণৰ আমাৰ দৃষ্টিগোচৰ নোহোৱাকৈ সেইবিলাক খৰচ হৈ থাকিব পাৰে। ৰাজনৈতিক পুঁজিৰ বিষয়ে নিজেই গভীৰভাৱে যদি আমি জানিব বিচাৰোঁ তেতিয়াহ'লে অসমত পুঁজিৰ ব্যৱস্থা একাধিক মাধ্যমেৰে চলি থকা যেন লাগে। যেনেধৰণে ধৰি লওক প্ৰথম তৃণমূল পৰ্যায়ত নগদ ধনৰ ট্ৰেন্সফাৰ হয়, নগদ ধনৰ খৰচ হয়। ছেকেণ্ডলি হৈছে চেক আৰু ডিজিটেল ট্ৰান্সফাৰৰ জৰিয়তে ৰাজনৈতিক দললৈ বা ব্যক্তিলৈ দলীয় নেতালৈ আহে। আৰু দলৰ নেতৃত্বৰ কেন্দ্ৰীয় ব্যয় মানে যিটো চেন্ট্ৰেলি আপুনি যিটো কৈ আছে যে দলবিলাকে কিমান খৰচ কৰে সেই তাৰ জৰিয়তে। আৰু নিৰ্বাচনী ট্ৰাষ্ট, আপোনালোকে জানে হয়তো যে ইলেক্ট্ৰেল ট্ৰাষ্ট বুলি এটা প্ৰতিষ্ঠান আৰম্ভ হৈছে, একে সময়তে তেওঁলোকৰ জৰিয়তেও বিভিন্ন ধৰণৰ ফাণ্ডিং হয়। আমি ইলেক্ট্ৰল বণ্ড বাতিল হোৱা দেখিলোঁ, য'ত পূৰ্বে বেনামী অনুদানৰ অনুমতি দিয়া আছিল ইলেক্ট্ৰেল বণ্ডৰ জৰিয়তে। স্বচ্ছতাৰ উন্নতি হৈছেনে এই ইলেক্ট্ৰেল বণ্ডটো নাইকিয়া হোৱাৰ পিছত? আৰু সেই স্বচ্ছতাৰ অৱস্থাটো এতিয়া কেনেকুৱা? Shelly, I would like to speak in English so that you can understand it. So effectively, a significant part of election spending may be happening through party channels or outside formal reporting system. Let's go deeper into the political funding itself. In Assam, funding appears to operate through multiple channels. Number one is cash at the grassroots level. Number two, check and digital transfer. Number three, party-led central expenditure, as you have mentioned that how much political parties are spending. And institutional routes like electoral trust. There are some electoral trust in the country now who is funding. At the same time, we have seen the scrapping of electoral bonds in the recent past, which earlier allowed anonymous donations. Has transparency improved, or has funding simply shifted to other less visible norms?
Right. So I think firstly, it's important for us to understand that the removal of electoral bonds was a very landmark step towards transparency and reaffirming citizens' right to information about the sources of political funding, right? But at the same time, we also need to understand that it cannot be a one-stop solution. Time and again, ADR has also pointed that opacity in political funding is something which is very systemic in nature. While one opaque channel might be removed, but funds can come from other sorts of channels. At this moment, while we don't have electoral bonds, we've seen that donations are incoming through electoral trust, through cash contributions, as you mentioned. There's also a whole black economy which operates outside the official reporting mechanism. So without disclosure, comprehensive disclosure norms, and a real-time transparency, these kind of underlying problems will continue to exist. One thing that we need to see is we've recently come out with the donations report of national parties. And since the scrapping of the electoral bond scheme, we've seen that a huge amount of donations has been coming to political parties either directly from the corporate donations or individuals, or they're getting it through electoral trust, because both corporates and individuals can actually make donation to political parties through these trusts. Now, trusts are, in comparison to electoral bonds, which were completely anonymous, trusts are partially transparent because every year they file their annual report. They declare the donations they receive from various companies. And at the same time, in their filings, they also mentioned how much amount of these donations are being given to which political parties. Now, they are partially transparent because the only information that is not available to the general public is exactly which company through these trusts is actually making a donation to the political party. This information is only accessible to the Election Commission of India or the Central Board of Direct Taxes. Since we're talking about political funding here, we also need to understand that there are some key issues which persist in the current electoral regulatory system. Now that the electoral bonds do not exist anymore, and I would like to highlight these so that our audience or viewers are able to understand what are the challenges that we now face if we want to fix transparency and accountability in political finance. Number one is that now that electoral bonds have been scrapped, what is the current mechanism of corporate donation? Are we going back to the pre-post electoral, I mean, to the pre-electoral bond scenario, where there was a limit of 7.5% on corporate donations? We've seen that parties are receiving money from corporates, but is there any sort of compliance with this 7.5%? So there is no clarity as of now whether in the absence of electoral bonds and now that those amendments to the Finance Act have been withdrawn, are we actually complying with the pre 2017 regulatory framework where there was a 7.5% cap? Are companies now donating in adherence to this cap or not? So that is one issue that there is no clarity about. Second is in terms of how the level playing field is being skewed right now. We've seen that in terms of the sources of income of donation to political parties, we've seen it's the ruling party which gets disproportionate amount of donations compared to all other parties put together. We've recently released a report for financial year 2024-25 where we've seen that the ruling party at the center has 10 times more donations above rupees 20,000 than all other national parties put together. So this definitely has a huge impact on the electoral competitiveness. At the same time, there's also concentration of power or resources in the hands of few companies because each year when we analyze what are the companies who are donating to political parties, whether directly or through electoral trust, and we find that it's the same concentrated handful group of companies which continue to dominate the political funding. Among electoral trusts, we've seen that the prudent electoral trust has the maximum amount of donation that it is making to political parties, and it's several times more than all other trusts. So, completely the level playing field at this point in time does not exist. And the third important point that I want to mention is that while there's a lot of focus was on electoral bonds and electoral trust, but one thing that we overlook is the donations below rupees 20,000. The law right now says that political parties need not declare the donation details of those donations which are below the threshold limit of 20,000. We've seen that a party like the Bahujan Samaj Party has been declaring for past 19 years that they have not received a single donation exceeding rupees 20,000. And as a result, they don't file their contribution report because they're not required by law. So here the problem is that while there's a reporting threshold, but this is subject to misuse because same donor can contribute small amounts below rupees 20,000 multiple times, and then each different donation can be counted separately for the purpose of disclosure. So parties are able to bypass this reporting requirement despite receiving a large overall sum of money from the same donor. So I think this loophole needs to be fixed. And by breaking larger donations into smaller sums, a substantial amount of political donation comes from unknown sources, which is not this information, which is not available to the public. So there's been time and again recommendation that to address this issue, it's very important that we modify the provision. And that's in such a way that an individual or a company cannot contribute more than 20,000 rupees in a given financial year.
অ'কে গতিকে যিটো ট্ৰান্সপাৰেঞ্চিৰ অভাৱ অস্পষ্টতা সেইটো নাইকিয়া হৈ যোৱা নাই ই কেৱল নিজৰ পথ সলনি কৰিছে আমি বিশেষভাৱে যদি অসমলৈ চাওঁ তেন্তে এটা আৰ্হি স্পষ্ট হৈ পৰে ধৰি লওক এতিয়া আঞ্চলিক দলসমূহ যেনে ৰাইজৰ দল অসম জাতীয় পৰিষদ এজিপি ইউপিপিএল বিপিএফ এআইইউডিএফ বৃহৎ দলৰ তুলনাত একেবাৰে বেলেগ বিত্তীয় পৰিৱেশ এটাত তেওঁলোকে কাম কৰি আছে এইটো কোৱা শুদ্ধ হ'বনে যে আঞ্চলিক দলসমূহে স্থানীয় নেটৱৰ্ক আৰু প্ৰাৰ্থীৰ পুঁজিৰ ওপৰত অধিক নিৰ্ভৰশীল বা বৃহৎ দলসমূহে কৰ্পৰেট আৰু আনুষ্ঠানিক পুঁজিৰ চেনেলৰ সুবিধা লাভ কৰাৰ সময়ত আমাৰ স্থানীয় দলসমূহে নিজৰ স্থানীয় নেটৱৰ্ক আৰু নিজৰ পুঁজিৰ ওপৰত বেছি নিৰ্ভৰশীল sorry I'm speaking it again in English. So opacity has not disappeared, Shelly, what I have understood from you. It has simply changed its route. When we look specifically at Assam, we could see another pattern. Regional parties such as Raizor Dol, Ahom Jatiya Porikhod, AGP, UPPL, BPF, AIUDF, these are operating in a very different financial ecosystem compared to the large parties. Would it be correct to say that regional parties depend on more on local networks and candidate funding, like the parties I have mentioned, while larger parties have access to corporate and institutional funding channels? Am I true? Am I correct on that?
So I think I can only speak, on the basis of the analysis that has been done by ADR of the official reports of these parties. When we look at it cumulatively, it is very true that the larger national parties, they are able to receive a significant amount of share of donations, right? From corporate donors or from other institutional donors, often through formal channels. However, in terms of regional parties, we've seen that they amass only a very minuscule amount of such funds as per the official declaration. So obviously, there is not only an uneven level playing field within national parties as such, but it's also within national parties and regional parties. And another very important observation here is that when we look at the the availability of the donations report or audit reports of regional parties, many times these reports are not even available in the public domain. Like for the parties that you've mentioned, we've seen that for the financial year 2023, we've data only available for UPPL party and AIUDF. So if I were to give you that figure, back in financial year 22-23, we've seen that UPPL received 13 donations of rupees 13.98 lakhs only. And the AIUDF party received only 7 donations exceeding rupees 20,000 of 8.3 lakh rupees. So this is the, you can understand the quantum of funds that such parties are having. However, in addition to this, I'd also like to point out that if you look at this financial year 24-25's analysis of donations to national parties, Assam actually is one of the state which contributes funds to national parties also. So we've seen that about 14.33 crore worth of donations came from Assam to national parties. The top 5 companies which donated to national parties were like Progressive Cam Private Limited, there was SM Corporation Limited, Top Cam Limited, Shiv Shakti Steels and Meta. So while we are talking about regional parties not being able to access resources at an equal footing compared to national parties, we also need to understand that there is a chunk of donations coming from the state of Assam to national parties. 26 donations of rupees 11.224 crore worth corporate donations were made to national parties in financial year 24-25 from companies which are based out of Assam. And about 179 individual donations worth rupees 2.1033 crore came to national parties in the financial year 24-25.
Okay. So it's a very interesting dimension. So এইটো অকল অকল পুঁজিৰ কথা নহয় তেতিয়াহ'লে ই গণতন্ত্ৰৰ ভিতৰতে অসমান প্ৰতিযোগিতাৰ কথা। মই যিটো প্ৰশ্ন আটাইতকৈ গুৰুত্বপূৰ্ণ বুলি ভাবোঁ এই মুহূৰ্তত সেইটোলৈ আহক। যদি পুঁজি আহে ৰাজনৈতিক দলৰ পৰা, যদি পুঁজি আহে দাতাসকলৰ পৰা, আৰু যদি পুঁজি আহে অন্যান্য বাহ্যিক উৎসৰ পৰা, তেন্তে নিৰ্বাচিত প্ৰতিনিধি কাৰ ওচৰত জবাবদাহি হ'ব? কাৰ কাৰণে তেওঁলোকে কাম কৰিব? তেওঁলোকে কাম কৰিব যিজন ভোটাৰে তেওঁলোকক ভোট দিব তেওঁৰ কাৰণে, নে যিজনে তেওঁলোকক পুঁজি দান কৰিব পুঁজিদাতাজনৰ কাৰণে কাম কৰিব? ভোটদাতাৰ ওপৰত তেওঁলোক বেছি জবাবদাহি হ'ব নে তেওঁলোক পুঁজিদাতাৰ ওপৰত বেছি জবাবদাহি হ'ব? Shelly, what my question is, it is not just about funding. It is about unequal competition within democracy itself. Let me come to what I think is the most important question in funding comes from. First is political parties, funding come from. Donors, there are different donors that gives money to the political process. And external sources. External sources could be diverse. Then who is the elected representative accountable to? The voter or the funder?
Right. I think the question that you ask is a very fundamental question for democracy today. While political financing lacks transparency, it becomes very difficult to assess whether elected representatives are accountable primarily to voters or to those who finance their campaigns. We've seen that consistently it has been argued that opaque funding, it risks policy capture, where decisions may favor donors rather than public interest. We've seen this at the time of the date of electoral bonds was made public. In the aftermath of the Supreme Court judgment, all the data related to electoral bonds was put out in the public domain. Many media investigations happened and they brought about that how it resulted in crony capitalism and political corruption, where decisions of the politicians were strongly tied to their corporate donors and it actually jeopardized the quality of governance. To substantiate this, I would like to mention that there were media investigations which showed that several pharmaceutical companies they failed drug quality tests, but they actually donated to political parties through electoral bonds. So they were able to, bypass a lot of scrutiny. These
Oh my
investigative
God.
reports, they also found that several companies which were rated by central agencies or income tax authorities, they later purchased electoral bonds and donated to ruling parties, both at the center and at the state. The sectors which
Okay.
purchased the bulk of electoral bonds, they came from, sectors like mining, power generation, including sinful industries like gaming and all, lottery, infrastructure contractors, real estate, and highly regulated sectors. So we need to understand that it is very clear that political parties, if they substantially rely on corporate donations to finance their election campaigns, then they will, at the end of the day, will be more responsive to the needs and requirements of their donors over policy making, which prioritizes the needs of their people, right? Just one more figure, that key figure that I want to point out here for you to understand how crony capitalism has been taking shape. As per a Reporters Collective 2024 investigation, we saw that at least 16 of the top 200 firms which donated electoral bonds to political parties, they did so despite running their businesses in loss for 3 previous consecutive years. So let us
Wow.
understand that how the funding is actually funding, political funding is operating at the moment, and so that our viewers also understand that why it is very important for citizens to understand who is actually donating to political parties, because it directly impacts their day-to-day lives.
Okay, okay. It's very, very interesting. তাৰমানে শেষত ৰাজনীতিত কোনে ধন দিয়ে সেইটোৱে ৰাজনীতিয়ে কি যোগান ধৰে সেই বিষয়টো প্ৰভাৱিত কৰে ৰাজনীতিক যি ধন দিয়ে তেওঁই ৰাজনীতিৰ পৰা বেলেগ ধৰণৰ কিছুমান যোগাৰ বেলেগ ধৰণৰ সমৰ্থন তেওঁলোকে আদায় কৰিবলৈ সক্ষম হয় অকমান মই বেলেগ এটা দিশলৈ আহিব খুজিছো চেলি আমি দেখা আন এটা আৰ্হি হ'ল খৰচৰ এটা বৃহৎ অংশ ইলেকশ্যন এই নিৰ্বাচন প্ৰক্ৰিয়াটোত যিখিনি খৰচ হৈ আছে তাৰ এটা বৃহৎ পৰিমাণৰ খৰচ তেওঁলোকে ৰেলীত খৰচ কৰে যোগাযোগ ব্যৱস্থা বাহন গাড়ী ট্ৰান্সপৰ্ট এইবিলাকত খৰচ কৰে প্ৰচাৰ কৰ্মীৰ ওপৰত তেওঁলোকে খৰচ কৰে ঠিক আছে কিন্তু ইছ্যু ভিত্তিক যোগাযোগ তেওঁলোকে সেইটো ইছ্যু তেওঁলোকৰ কি বিষয় বিশেষ ইছ্যু সেইটোৰ ওপৰত তেওঁলোকৰ প্ৰভাৱ যথেষ্ট কম দেখা যায় যেনেকৈ ধৰি লওক নিৰ্বাচন ক্ৰমান্বয়ে আলোচনা আৰু নীতিৰ পৰিৱৰ্তে বিভিন্ন আলোচনা বিলোচনা আৰু তেওঁলোকৰ নিজস্ব নীতিৰ ওপৰত গুৰুত্ব আৰোপ কৰাতকৈ তেওঁলোক কেনেকৈ ভিজিবল হয় কেনেকৈ দৃশ্যমান্য হয় কেনেকৈ সংগঠনৰ বিষয় হৈ পৰে এইটোৰ ওপৰত বেছি গুৰুত্ব দিয়া দেখা যায় মানে তেওঁলোকৰ প্ৰকৃত যিটো বিষয়বস্তু তেওঁলোকৰ যিটো যোগাযোগৰ কাৰণে ইম্পৰ্টেণ্ট কথা সেইটো উচ্চ হৈ থাকে তেওঁলোকৰ কি ধৰণে তেওঁলোকে তেওঁলোকক প্ৰকাশ কৰিব পাৰে প্ৰচাৰ কৰিব পাৰে নিজক দেখুৱাব পাৰে সেইটোৰ ওপৰত বেছিকৈ গুৰুত্ব আৰোপ কৰা যায় আপুনি কি ভাবে ইয়াৰ সম্পৰ্কত I'm talking in English because ultimately who funds politics often influence what politics delivers. Another pattern we see that a large portion of expenditure goes into rallies, vehicles, transport, campaign workers, but relatively little into issue-based communication. Are elections increasingly becoming about visibility and mobilization rather than dialogue and policy?
I think to answer this question, it is very important to look at the official expenses that were declared by political parties during the 2021 five-state assembly elections that happened. When we look at
Okay.
the figures from those elections, we see that political parties spent maximum on publicity. Publicity is divided into 3 other categories. One is media advertisement, where they spent close to 200 crores, followed by expenditure on publicity materials, where parties spent close to 63 crore, and public meetings, where the expenditure was about 17 crore. Now, when we look at the data from Assam units, the state unit of political parties, consolidated amount that was spent was 54 crore, 54.216 crore actually. Out of this, 9.084 crore was spent on publicity, 29.946 crore was spent on lump sum amount that were paid to candidates, 13.455 crore was spent on travel, and remaining amount was spent on other miscellaneous expenses and on the publication of criminal antecedents of candidates. Now, usually what we've seen when we've analyzed expenditure statements across elections, we've seen that the maximum official declared expenditure is on publicity. That is highest among all heads as per the official disclosure. Political parties basically, I mean, and within publicity also, we've seen that political parties make highest expenditure on media advertising. However, while this is factually this is a reality, but we also need to cater in that over the last few years digital campaigning has also changed the course of election campaigning and the cost dynamics of elections. Digital platforms like social media, messaging apps, targeted advertisements, they can be more cost effective, right, rather than the traditional methods like large rallies or printing advertising. While parties continue to hold rallies in these traditional way of communicating with voters is something which is absolutely integral to the election campaign. But we've also seen that parties have been making use of social media campaigning at a very large scale to reach out to voters because it helps them reach out to voters at a relatively lower per unit cost. But while this shift has been happening, we also see that this shift is not clearly reflected in the expenditure disclosures by political parties or the candidates. Like you pointed out that a very large number of MLAs, they have declared that they spend zero negligible spending on media. And this is despite them having social media accounts or they have online and offline campaign activity. This clearly indicates that digital spending is either unreported or it is difficult to track or account for outside candidate expenditure, which is often might be routed through political parties or third party actors. So I think if we cater into these sort of facts and the understanding that right now how the monitoring and the overview of the election expenditure takes place, it might help us understand that the official records may not give a full picture. And while parties might be using different modes to communicate to the voters, some might come out to be as more dominant compared to other sources or other channels that they might employ.
Okay, so this is a very, very crucial issue now, means, but it is not in the right position. I mean, the election or the election expenditure, the funding pattern and everything is not in the right position now. আপুনি কি কি সংস্কাৰ আটাইতকৈ জৰুৰী বুলি ভাবে এই অৱস্থাত Shelly? What are the reforms do you think are the most urgent for to change the situation and make it more people friendly and democratic?
So there are actually many reforms which several committees have come up with over the course of last few decades. We've seen different types of reforms being suggested by experts, previous chief election commissioners and committees. We've been formulated with this task. But I'd like to quickly point out some very key reforms in terms of the issue of political finance that we're discussing today in this episode. So first and most important suggestion would be that we need a comprehensive law dealing with political parties, regulating and monitoring their functioning, financial transactions, inner party democracy, party constitution. It's very important that a political finance framework or legislation is adopted, which is able to address all these issues that today we outlined in this episode. There's also a need to ensure limit on corporate donation. Donation limits must ensure that no single donor has undue influence on a candidate or political party or on the political process as a whole. One key recommendation that ADR has been making for quite some time is that the names of electoral trusts currently do not indicate the name of the company or group of companies which set up these trusts. In order to have greater transparency regarding the details of corporates who fund political parties, it would be ideal to include the names of the parent company in the name of the electoral trust. Another key recommendation is a suggestion to completely ban or prohibit anonymous donations, which would be very crucial for transparency and accountability in political finance. There's also a need, especially in today's time, that while it can be a possibility to completely digitize all forms of political financing. There should also be a limit on election expenditure, which is incurred by political parties on or during elections. This is one of the key recommendations which is important to arrest the increasing cost of elections every year. There's also a petition in the court by ADR in this regard. And I think at the same time, there's also a need for a specific law on online campaign finance. This is something which is fairly new. The Election Commission, with every election, comes out with guidelines, but these are not, I would say, they don't have any legal impact, but these are more so like on the lines of transparency guidelines, which they expect the candidates and parties to adhere to. So provisions can be incorporated in the existing laws on digital media with reference to elections that empower the Election Commission to suitably, in this space, ensure compliance by contestants and non-contestants. There's also a need to bring political parties under right to information. There's a 2013 CIC order to this effect. Parties have so far not complied with this, but I think this would, to a very large extent, bring transparency in political funding. And last two important recommendations that I like to put forth is that there's a need to ensure real-time, publicly accessible reporting of donations and election expenditure, which is missing at the moment on the website of the Election Commission of India. And there's very important need to strengthen the role and the independence of the Election Commission of India in monitoring expenditure and to overall foresee the financing regulatory framework of elections at the point.
Thank you. It is wonderful, interesting, very interesting. আৰু এতিয়া আমি যেতিয়া ভোট দিবলৈ যাম, আটাইতকৈ গুৰুত্বপূৰ্ণ কথাটো হৈছে আমি কাক ভোট দিম সেইটো ডাঙৰ কথা নহয়। আমি ভোটাৰসকলে এতিয়া সহজ এটা প্ৰশ্ন কৰিব লাগে যে মোৰ ভোট বিচৰা যিজন ব্যক্তি তেওঁক কোনে ধন আগবঢ়াইছে, কোনে ধন দিছে। ভোটাৰ হিচাপে আমি প্ৰচাৰ, ৰেলী, বিজ্ঞাপন আদি দেখিবলৈ পাই থাকোঁ, কিন্তু তেওঁলোকৰ আঁৰত থকা টকাবোৰ আমি খুব কমেইহে দেখা পাওঁ। অসম নিৰ্বাচনৰ বাবে প্ৰস্তুত যেতিয়া চলাই আছে, হয়তো আচল প্ৰশ্নটো কেৱল আমি কাক ভোট দিওঁ নহয়, আমি কেনে ধৰণৰ ব্যৱস্থাটোক ভোট দিছোঁ, কোনটো ব্যৱস্থাক ভোট দিছোঁ, কোন ব্যক্তিক নহয়। কাৰণ গণতন্ত্ৰ কেৱল ভোটৰ কথা নহয়, ই ধন, ক্ষমতা আৰু প্ৰভাৱৰ কথাও। যেতিয়া প্ৰাৰ্থীৰ সীমা থাকে কিন্তু দলৰ কোনো খৰচৰ সীমা নাথাকে, প্ৰকৃততে সীমা খৰচৰ ওপৰত আহিল নে স্বচ্ছতাৰ ওপৰত আহিল? সীমাটো স্বচ্ছতাৰ ওপৰত আহিল। Thank you very much. Thank you, Shelly ji, for coming. Thank you for strengthening our Assam Election Watch. আৰু সকলো দৰ্শককে নমস্কাৰ, ধন্যবাদ আমাৰ লগত যোগদান কৰাৰ বাবে। ধন্যবাদ।
Thank you so much, Ari ji, and thank you to everyone who's watching this episode today. Thank you.